if you're an institution today and you have zero exposure to the cryptocurrency asset class or market, you're violating your fiduciary duty, given that it was the best performing asset over the last decade, right? It has very unique characteristics when it comes to lower levels of correlation, upside, the per unit of risk that you take by allocating capital here. And so those institutions that are on 0% exposure have to do what we call get off zero, right? Each portfolio is different. So some it's 10 basis points, 50, 75, 200, 500, whatever the basis point number is. It's all about what their goals are, what their current allocations are, all of that. But 0 is the wrong number, right? And so that's much easier, I think, for long-term macro investors who have experience and even expertise in the alternative space. So Dave Swinson is like a perfect example at Yale. But I think that this is actually true at the central bank level, at the individual level, etc. And so let's go into a hypothetical world where the U.S. central bank is playing that game of musical chairs and they sit down. And it comes out that the U.S. central bank bought 10% of the network on the open market. What happens to Bitcoin, the price, and kind of the macroeconomic world if that was to come to light?
Well, them buying 5% would be impossible. Because
Why?
people need to realize that more than 10 million of Bitcoin, I believe somewhere between 10 to 13 million are like held and not like actively trading or actively circulating. Only 3 to 4 million are being actively traded. And as Bitcoin's price will be increasing, I believe that people will be realizing that this is there's really a financial revolution going here, and this is something to be kept for a long time. Relative to the amounts of capital that are sloshing around in capital markets around the world, Bitcoin is really so small still, right? It's really it's really liquid, really. As they even try to buy 0.5%, like that very act will raise the price so much in a vertical fashion that just buying the next 0.5% will be 8 times more expensive, and like this continues compounding in an exponential fashion. It will need to be done in an extremely stealthy, in an extremely clever, in an extremely patient manner over months, or over years, maybe even. And maybe even then they'll only be able to get to 2.5% ballpark, right? Here's what I like to say. Governments buying Bitcoin, really, I think they will be buying Bitcoin last. There's 2 things I want to say here. First of all, governments buying Bitcoin will essentially be putting the final nail in the coffin of reducing their own size by half. Because Bitcoin is unprintable, which we have discussed how it's going to destroy fiat currencies, and Bitcoin is increasingly untaxable. I mean, the privacy technologies around these technologies, as you know, will also keep improving rapidly. This is inevitable. And so I believe that governments buying Bitcoin will probably be the latest group of people to buy them. And that will be the final ultimate credibility, because essentially the biggest competitor is capitulating. Something like that will not just be a rumor. Something like that, given Bitcoin's illiquidity, will be extremely difficult to hide. I like to joke that once some Asian central bank or a sovereign wealth fund announces that they put 2% of their assets into a portfolio of blue chip cryptocurrencies, it's game over. But I don't think that central banks are really the people. By the time they will try to be accumulating any of them, Bitcoin will already be huge. I actually believe, and this is one of the things that my views differ from many people in the space actually. I actually think that Bitcoin's ascent will be driven predominantly by the wealthy. The three niches of investors that will sort of make Bitcoin's price skyrocket over the coming decades will be open-minded, ultra-high net worth individuals. It will be savvy funds and fund managers. And it will be, I think, politicians and dictators and sort of these fringe third world, second world individuals who will need this currency perhaps more than anyone else. And I like to joke that essentially the people and the institutions who Bitcoin was designed to destroy will be precisely the people who will drive Bitcoin's price and Bitcoin's success to the sky. Because if you think about it, the people who censor the most need uncensorable currency the most. The people who seize the most need unseizable assets the most. And of course, the people who print the most need unprintable currency the most. These people, every week you read about some fringe countries, wealthy individuals and government officials' bank accounts in Switzerland, in Luxembourg, in the Caribbean, being frozen, in America being blocked, transactions being censored. And this technology allows those very precise people to have unseizable store of value where they can essentially accumulate wealth with absolutely no one else in the world being able to take it away from them. So for better or worse, this is how free market instruments and free market technologies work. So it will be, of course, used for the good and the bad, but irregardless, these very people whose Bitcoin is fighting against ideologically will be the same people who will be helping it financially.
Absolutely. And I tend to think that you are more right than wrong on that, right? Okay, so before we kind of go into some rapid fire questions, if an institutional CIO, a central bank authority, a government leader is listening to this, give me your 60-second pitch to them why they should buy Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is the soundest, hardest currency that has ever been invented in the history of human civilization. This inflation is second to none. Its monetary policy is known years in advance, and it is becoming increasingly credible. It will also be increasingly a threat to the very currencies that you guys control. I think getting in before most other central banks and most other sovereign wealth funds and most other rich people will, in the next decade, will prove to be one of the smartest investment decisions in the course of human history. And if you are able, the countries that are able to stealthily accumulate Bitcoin and adopt Bitcoin more than other currencies will thrive in the age of hyper-Bitcoinization, while the other countries that haven't done so will suffer tremendously.